Welcome to this talk about the Charles Edmonstone Kirk burial ground at North Road in Carrickfergus. Charles Edmonstone Kirk was a son of Peter Kirk MP and Ellen Dalway of Thornfield in Carrickfergus. He joined the 68th Regiment of Foot as an ensign, later transferring to the 1st Royal Regiment, and served in the Crimean War, being awarded the campaign medals with the Alma, Inkerman and Sebastopol clasps. He died on 29th July 1857 in Bath whilst being treated for ill health arising from his time in Crimea, and he was interred in the family burial ground on 13th August. In the 1850s, the only graveyard in Carrickfergus was at St Nicholas Parish Church. In his will, Charles Edmonstone Kirk made a bequest for the establishment of an additional burial place which was to be available to all irrespective of denomination, and was to include a section for the free burial of the poor of the parish and strangers. The graveyard was established in 1859 and was known as the New Graveyard, and is also sometimes referred to as the North Road Cemetery. The mausoleum at the centre of the graveyard is the burial place for members of the Kirk family, but was also used as a mortuary chapel for burials of wealthier members of society, some of whose graves will be included in this talk. Whilst there are no war fatalities buried in the graveyard, 13 war fatalities are commemorated family plots, 8 Great War fatalities and 5 fatalities from the Second World War. David McNeely served in the Great War with 12th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, being deployed to France in October 1915 and being transferred to the Class Z Army Reserve on 25th February 1919. He was recorded as being a 21-year-old sailor when he married Catherine Craig on 2nd May 1919 at Joymount Presbyterian Church in Carrick. His deceased father's name was recorded as Edward McNeely. On the night of 3rd May 1941, the coal ship SS Corbett, owned by John Alexander of Belfast, left Liverpool during a German air raid. The ship hit a mine and sank with the loss of 8 lives, including David McNeely, who was a fireman on the ship. The ship's master, John McIntyre Tier, is commemorated on a family memorial in the Greenland Cemetery in Larne. David McNeely is recorded as being 41 years old when he died, and is commemorated on the Tower Hill Memorial in London. A newspaper report recorded that he was 43 years old and that Catherine McNeely was living at Sailors' Row in Carrickfergus when her husband died. This headstone commemorates Thomas Donald, who was lost at sea with SS City of Glasgow in March 1854 at the age of 40. It is not clear whether he was a passenger on the ship or a member of the crew. The SS City of Glasgow, a single screw passenger steamship built in 1850, was owned by the Inman Line, which was also known as the Liverpool and Philadelphia Steamship Company. She originally had a capacity for 44 first-class passengers and 85 second-class passengers, along with 1,200 tons of cargo. In 1852, she was refitted to accommodate 400 third-class passengers in her holds. Her fastest times for the Liverpool to Philadelphia voyage was 14 days. A 2-berth stateroom cost 21 guineas and steerage berth costs 8 guineas, which equate to £2,990 and £1,140 respectively in current terms. A charge for a dog was £3, which is just over £400 in current terms. SS City of Glasgow left Liverpool in March 1854 with 480 passengers and crew, but never reached her destination. City of Manchester, Glasgow's sister ship on the route, reported icebergs and large fields of ice in the North Atlantic during her voyage from Philadelphia to Liverpool in March 1854. Although there were several reported sightings of the City of Glasgow, none stood up to scrutiny, and she was accepted as lost at the end of May 1854. The ship and cargo were insured for £50,000, which would equate to £6.8 million in current terms. William Graham Boyd was born on 8 March 1896 at Ballyjamesduff in County Cavan to the Reverend Robert Henry Boyd and Sarah Louisa Graham, who later lived at Fitzroy in Carrickfergus. His father was minister of Ballyjamesduff Presbyterian Church for 22 years, and he died of apoplexy and pulmonary congestion at the manse in Derry Lauren on 7th December 1904, aged 46. In 1911, Sarah Louise Boyd was living in West Division with 5 children ranging in age from 8 to 15. William Graham Boyd was educated at the Royal Belfast Academical Institution and enlisted with 17th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles in April 1915. He received a commission with the Royal Irish Fusiliers in August 1915 and was posted to the 9th Battalion in France in late July 1916. He was promoted to lieutenant in February 1917 and was killed by enemy shell fire on 16th August 1917 at the age of 21. He is commemorated on the Tyncott Memorial in Belgium and on the Queen's University War Memorial. He is also commemorated on the memorial tablets for Inst, Queen's University Officers Training Corps, and Joymount Presbyterian Church in Carrickfergus. Ivor Snoddy was born around 1924 in Carrickfergus to Edward Snoddy and Jane Allen of Davies Row. Ivor Snoddy was a deckhand on SS Albert C. Field, a Canadian cargo ship that had been requisitioned by the British government. On 16th June 1944, she set sail from Penarth in Wales, bound for the Normandy beachhead as part of convoy EBC 14. She was carrying 2,500 tons of munitions and 1,300 bags of mail. On 18th June, the convoy was attacked by German aircraft 20 miles southwest of the Needles. The SS Albert C. Field was hit by a torpedo and sank within 3 minutes with the loss of 4 crewmen. Ivor Snoddy was 20 years old and is commemorated on the Tower Hill Memorial in England. Albert Manning was born on 22nd July 1917 at Carricklee near Strabane to William Manning and Elizabeth McCormick, who later lived at Aspect Cottage in Green Island. He was the cook on SS President Dumer, a French motor passenger ship that had been requisitioned by the French Navy as a troop ship on 3rd September 1939 and subsequently taken over by the British Ministry of War Transport on 19th July 1940. The ship was torpedoed and sank by German submarine U-604 northeast of Madeira in very bad weather conditions on 30th October 1942, with the loss of the ship's master, Jean-Paul Mantelet, 173 crew members, 23 naval gunners and 63 soldiers. Albert Manning was 25 years old and is commemorated on the Tower Hill Memorial in London and on the memorial tablet for St. Nicholas Church of Ireland. Jumping back in time to the 1860s, in September 1863, the Royal Navy's Channel Fleet visited Belfast Lough and several ships were moored off Carrickfergus, including HMS Edgar, which was the fleet's flagship. On 11 September, officers and men from HMS Edgar spent the day in Belfast, returning to Carrickfergus on the 6:30 p.m. train. First Assistant Engineer John Frederick Hattersley and Sub-Lieutenant Clarence Gardner were in a first-class carriage along with other officers. When the train was approaching Troopers Lane Station, Hattersley and Gardner decided to run along the top of the carriages to the engine. Clarence Gardner fell during this escapade. It was only when the train arrived in Carrickfergus that Hattersley realised that Gardner was not on the train. He went back along the tracks where he discovered his friend's body. Clarence Gardner was buried shortly before HMS Edgar departed from Belfast Lough, and the headstone was later erected by his messmates. My thanks to Geraldine Wiley, a great niece of Samuel McClure, who provided these images and informed me that his diary was available at the Public Records Office. Samuel John Paisley McClure was born on 10th October 1896 at Duncairn Street in Belfast to Samuel McClure, a fitter, and Mary Jane Paisley. The family lived at Skegnall Avenue in 1901 and at Deacon Street in 1911. When Samuel Sr. was recorded as being a mechanical engineer. The family was living at White Abbey in 1917 when Samuel McClure Sr. was working at White Abbey Hospital. Samuel and Mary lived at Roselee on North Road in Carrickfergus in the 1940s. Samuel McClure Jr. was an apprentice mechanic at Workman Clark de Belfast Shipyard when he enlisted with the 110th Field Ambulance Royal Army Medical Corps, and he maintained a diary during his overseas service, and much of what follows came from that diary. Samuel transferred to the Royal Field Artillery in 1915 and left Devonport on 15th March 1916, stopping at Alexandria for 4 nights and at Mudros for 2 nights, and arriving at Salonika on 3rd April 1916. On 28th July, Samuel sustained head injuries in an aircraft attack and was evacuated from Salonika on board HM hospital ship Braemar Castle on 15th August, being admitted to St. Elmo's Military Hospital in Malta on 20th August. He left Malta on 29 September on board hospital ship Warilda, arriving at Mudros on 1st October, and was transferred to hospital ship Britannic for the voyage to UK. He arrived at Southampton on 11th October, was treated at the Stepping Hill Hospital near Manchester, and had a spell of home leave in November 1916. The diary resumes in 1917, recording that Samuel left Bandon in County Cork on 17th April and, travelling via Dublin and Southampton, arrived at Le Havre 2 days later. Samuel John Paisley McClure was a gunner with 108th Brigade of the Royal Field Artillery when he was killed in action on 24th June 1917, aged 20, and is buried in Popperinge New Military Cemetery in Belgium. Locally, he is commemorated on the Workman Clark Memorial and on the memorial tablet for Castleton Presbyterian Church in Belfast. Mary Jane McClure received the war gratuity of £12 in October 1919, which equates to approximately £725 in current terms. Samuel's diary includes this poem: "The rose is red, the violet is blue, the honey is sweet, and so are you. Think of me when you are lonely, think of me when you are sad. Think of one who loves you dearly, and the thoughts will make you glad." Jenkins Goldsworthy and his wife Margaret of Irish Quarter Street South lost one son in the Great War and another in the Second World War. The Goldsworthy brothers are both commemorated on the memorial tablet for St. Nicholas Church of Ireland in Carrickfergus. John Jenkins Goldsworthy was born on 23rd August 1896 at Sailors' Row, and he enlisted with 12th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, being deployed to France in October 1915. Rifleman Goldsworthy was killed in action on 14 September 1917 at the age of 21 and is buried in Hermes British Cemetery in France. Margaret Goldsworthy received a war gratuity of £14 in November 1919 and a pension of 10 shillings per week, which was later decreased to 5 shillings per week. Thomas Gill Goldsworthy was born on 5th October 1894 at Sailors' Row, and he served with the Mercantile Marine during the Great War. He married Laura Lockett in Quarter 1, 1921 at Prescott in Lancashire, and they lived at Tyneville Road in Liverpool. Thomas Goldsworthy was chief steward on board SS Fircrest when she was torpedoed and sunk by the German submarine U-124 off the Isle of Lewis on 25th August 1940, with the loss of 40 lives. He was 45 years old and is commemorated on the Tower Hill Memorial in England. His parents were living at Southgate in Carrickfergus when he died. Alexander Taylor was born on 25th March 1872 at Scott's Quarter in Carrickfergus to James Taylor, JP, and Helen or Ellen Stewart. Although James Taylor was recorded as a flax spinner on the birth register, in reality he was the principal proprietor of Barn Flax Spinning Mills, where he died in a tragic accident in the engine room on 27 September 1871 at the age of 35. The register of death records that he died instantaneously when his head was crushed to atoms, and the somewhat gory report in the Londonderry Sentinel recorded that the head was some distance from the body and that hair and brains were to be found on the teeth cogs in the machinery. James Taylor's effects were recorded as being just under £25,000, which equates to 3.2 million in current terms. His brother Alexander Taylor became the proprietor of the family firm. In 1881, Ellen Taylor was living at St. Andrews Avenue in Bothwell with her 2 sons and a daughter. Alexander graduated from the University of Glasgow with a Master of Arts degree in 1892 and was awarded his Bachelor of Law degree in 1895. He was commissioned into the 9th Volunteer Battalion of the Royal Scots in 1900, and the battalion was renamed as the 9th Highlanders Battalion and designated as a territorial force under the Army Reforms of 1908. Alexander Taylor held the rank of captain when 9th Battalion landed at Le Havre on 26 February 1915 as part of 27th Division. He was wounded in spring 1915, and it was a year before he returned to the Western Front. Captain Alexander Taylor was killed in action on 21st April 1917, aged 45, during an attempt to capture trenches west of Mount Pleasant Wood. He is buried in Level Cross Cemetery at Fampoux in France and is commemorated on the Barn Mills Memorial Tablet in Carrickfergus Town Hall. He was survived by his widow Rhoda Taylor, née McIntyre, who subsequently married a Mr. White of Taunton in Somerset. The inscription on the family memorial records his regiment as Royal Scots Highlanders. George Hay Sutherland was born around 1875 to Alexander Sutherland and Mary Main. His father was a mining engineer and had been suffering from tuberculosis for 2 years when he died on 21st December 1891 at Ballyrobert near Templepatrick. George Sutherland's medal index card records that he served as a trooper in South Africa in 1914 and that he was commissioned into 12th Battalion Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers on 23rd August 1915. He was posted to 9th Battalion on the Western Front on 17th June 1916 and held the rank of lieutenant when he died of wounds at Bologna on 2nd November 1918, just days before the armistice was signed. He was 43 years old and is buried in Terlincoln British Cemetery at Wamille in France. Mary Sutherland was living at Vril Lodge on Tower Road in Larne when her son died. Thomas Gorman Feeney, a relieving officer with Carrickfergus Poor-Law Union, and his wife Mary lost one son in the Great War and another son in the Second World War. The Feeney brothers are commemorated on the memorial tablet for St. Nicholas, Church of Ireland. Hugh Morrison Feeney was born on 8th October 1881 at Green Street in Carrickfergus, but is not recorded as living in the family home at Castle Street in 1901 or 1911. The family later lived at Governor's Walk in the town. Hugh Feeney was recorded as being a clerk when he enlisted with the 46th Company Imperial Yeomanry in Belfast on 13th January 1900. He saw service in the Second Anglo-Boer War, being awarded the Queen's South Africa Medal with Cape Colony, Orange Free State and South Africa 1901 clasps. He was discharged on 15th June 1901 at his own request. Hugh Feeney was a timber worker when he enlisted in Masterton on 14th August 1914 and left New Zealand 2 months later on board transport number 6, arriving in Egypt on 3rd December. Sergeant Feeney was serving with the Wellington Mounted Rifles when he sustained gunshot wounds to the thigh at Anzac Cove on 25th July, and he died 2 days later on board HM Hospital ship Somali. He was 33 years old and is buried in East Mudros Military Cemetery. Thomas Victor Feeney was born on 24th May 1890 at Albert Road in Carrickfergus and married Doris Ingleson in Q2 of 1938 at Watford. Their home was 5 Sussex Mansions, Maiden Lane, London. Thomas Victor Feeney held the position of first electrician on SS Duchess of York, an ocean liner that had been requisitioned as a troop ship by the Admiralty. On 5th July 1943, SS Duchess of York sailed from Greenock as part of a convoy bound for Freetown in Sierra Leone. She was in company with SS California and the cargo ship Port Fairy. 2 days later, the convoy was attacked by 3 Focke-Wulf aircraft 300 miles west of Vigo in Spain. The accurate high-altitude bombing set the Duchess of York ablaze, resulting in the loss of 27 lives. Thomas Victor Feeney died of injuries on board one of the rescue ships on 12th July 1943 at the age of 53 and is buried in Ben Misik European Cemetery in Morocco. Samuel Boyd was born on 14th January 1884 at Unity Street in Carrickfergus to Samuel Boyd, a shipwright, and Mary Gillespie, and the family was living at Duncairn Gardens by 1911. Samuel was an invoice clerk when he enlisted with 14th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France in October 1915. He was killed in action on 31st January 1917, aged 33, and is buried in Burke Cemetery Extension in Belgium. Mary Boyd received a dependence pension of 14 shillings per week from November 1917. Samuel Boyd was commemorated on the memorial tablet for York Street Presbyterian Church, which was destroyed during the German air raids of 1941. James Taylor Reid was born on 28th July 1851 in Lanarkshire to John Reid and Mary Taylor, and the family later lived at Barn House in Carrickfergus. He was a Justice of the Peace and had served as High Sheriff for the county town of Carrickfergus in 1882. On the death of his uncle, Alexander Taylor, he became proprietor of Barn Flax Spinning Mills. having served his apprenticeship at Coombe Barber and Coombe in Belfast. Whilst on holiday, he died at Harrogate on 21st September 1883 at the age of 32. He left effects totalling £64,820, 10 shillings and 10 pence, which equates to approximately £8,103,844 in current terms. Thomas Dick was born around 1925 to Adam Dick and Annie Hagan, who had married at St Anne's Parish Church on 15th December 1913. Thomas Dick was a sergeant with 12th Squadron Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, and he died on 30th August 1944 when an Avro Lancaster aircraft from RAF Wickenby failed to return from a night raid over Stettin. He was 19 years old and is buried in Poznan Old Garrison Cemetery in Poland and commemorated on the memorial tablet for St Nicholas Church of Ireland. David Redmond Taggart was born on 20th March 1839, the son of William Taggart, a farmer, and Mary Redmond, and he married Julia McKee on 2nd December 1869 at St Mary's Church of Ireland in Dublin, and he was appointed as assistant surgeon to the Antrim Artillery in January 1875. He was the coroner for County Antrim and Carrickfergus and surgeon for the Charles Shields Institute, which commissioned Charles Lanyon to design a set of almshouses in Carrickfergus. The Institute also had almshouses in other parts of Ulster, including Armagh and Dungannon. David Redmond Taggart died of tuberculosis at Governor's Place on 10th April 1886, aged 47, and is also commemorated on a memorial tablet in St Nicholas Church of Ireland. The funeral service took place in the mortuary chapel at the graveyard, and the coffin was carried by 6 sergeants from the permanent staff of 2nd Brigade, North Irish Division, Royal Artillery. He left effects of £2,847, 6 shillings and 6 pence, which equates to over £390,000 in current terms. Additional information for this biography is courtesy of Valerie Kerr. William John Anderson Johnson was the only son of William John Johnson, the manager, and Jane Anderson of Carrickfergus. They had married at Templecoran on 13th August 1852. The headstone records that he died of yellow fever at Rio de Janeiro on 30th January 1873 at the age of 18. The headstone indicates that his childhood was in Carrickfergus and that the family later lived in Manchester. John Reid was born on 23rd July 1851 to William Reid and Martha Reid, and he was master of SS Alcides, which belonged to the Donaldson line. He died of heart failure at New York on 18th May 1906, aged 54, and was buried in the Moravian burial ground on Staten Island. At the time, his home address was 56 Duncairn Gardens in Belfast. Although he was married, effects totaling £115, 12 shillings and 11 pence, just over 15,000 in current terms, were granted to his brother William Reid, a shipbroker. George Stewart was born around 1932 to William John Stewart and Maria Edith Stewart, and his flying career began as a cadet with the Carrickfergus Squadron of the Air Training Corps. He later joined the Royal Air Force and was trained in America, where he won his wings in 1953. After a spell of home leave over Christmas 1953, he was posted to Oldenburg RAF station in Germany. Early in 1954, he was involved in a flying accident which necessitated convalescence at home. 3 weeks after returning to his unit, he died on 23rd July 1954 after parachuting out of his Canadair Sabre jet when it caught fire during a night flying exercise near Hood in North Germany. His funeral took place on Saturday, 31st July, and was attended by over 1,000 people, with businesses closing for 1 hour as a mark of respect. The funeral cortege was led by Carrickfergus Silver Band, of which Flying Officer George Stewart was a former member. The family home was at Nelson Street, and his father was a security officer at the Courtholes factory. His sister Eileen was Carrick's May Queen in 1954. And that brings this talk to a conclusion. Thank you for watching and listening.